¿Qué tal? Muy buenas tardes a
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back after lunch. I hope you made the most of it. I hope that you have your batteries fully charged. Back again. We've covered the first few hours of this edition of Cybercamp, and we're all ready to continue now with our workshops. Welcome back again, as I said, both for those of you who are here and those who are on streaming. Here we have with us José Selvi, a Principal Security Consultant at NCC Group, who will be telling us about side channel attacks on HTTPS. He is an engineer in IT, in computer science. He's now doing his PhD dissertation, preparing it. And I hope that you make the most of his presentation. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. So, we're ready to start with our workshop. And the idea started with some of my research. Well, I've been introduced. My name is José Selvi. I've been working for most of my professional career in security, really taking things apart with the excuse of auditing products and finding things that were wrong with them. And when I have some free time, I like doing research. I also travel to Argentina, in London, in Spain, giving lectures and presentations on security issues. And this has to do with side channel attacks. That's the title for our workshop. I'm not going to tell you about all the HTTPS attacks in general, but about this type in particular. And it started because I was auditing a product, and one of the applications they had this type of vulnerability, of breach. And it looked quite similar to other things I had seen in the past, but looking into it, I became more and more interested in it. I found many systems were affected by this vulnerability at different companies. I started giving presentations on it, and I found that when I prepared different breaches and attacks to study this issue, I found there was a lot of uncertainty and there was a general lack of knowledge. And I thought, well, let's prepare this workshop on side channels and side channel attacks. So here we have the table of contents for my presentation. Can I ask you, raise your hand if you know what a side channel is? Oh dear, very few people. Fair enough. So, what is a side channel? Let's imagine this scenario. We often hear about pentagons, and because I live in Valencia, in eastern Spain, I see this situation quite often. Let's imagine this is a regional minister who owns a car. He's got his home. Then the following day, well, he's still got the same belongings. And the same thing again in future, but little by little he's adding more and more properties, a castle in Scotland, his own private jet, and yet there's not a briefcase there with a lot of cash. But look at the difference between these 2 days. Something has happened in between them. How do we know that? Because we see a change in the environment. That's a clue that something happened. And this is what side channel attacks take advantage of. It's quite common in cryptography. I might not see the whole encryption and decryption scenario, but let's imagine an authentication system which is badly done, where character by character it checks if your password is right. Well, if you get the first one wrong, the response time is a telltale, whether it takes longer to calculate if the character is correct at the beginning of the word or at the end of the word, which is something that has been exploited in the field of hardware. You are supposed to have a gadget where cryptographic information and keys are contained that you're not supposed to access, so that you can then replicate the gadget elsewhere. So these techniques are used to try and skip all the security barriers that you have for this type of hardware. Because really, side channels, all of them are based on this basic idea, but then they use different means to go about it. We need to find a way to add an input, a stimulus. In the case of the password I gave earlier, you need to a stimulus. You need to add characters for possible passwords, and then there is a need for monitoring what is happening, to monitor the environment, to see if it takes longer or shorter, to see if a character is right. And at the end of that process, over and above that is what we call the oracle, is the system that we use to ask questions. For instance, in a password, the first letter is A. I try and I measure the time it takes to tell me if it's correct or not. When I say, is it A? Well, it took longer than when I asked, is B correct? Is E correct? Or C correct? And that's how I can tell, the system can tell if the answer was right. And this is what we can do as well to explore these breaches or failures. Sometimes they're very subtle, and if we're not careful, we won't see it. So that's the general idea for side channels, which is a term that comes up in many different contexts, but we've focused it on side channels for HTTPS during our presentation. So we're typing www.google.com. Our browser, if it's an MS, then it tries to guess what IP it is. So that's how we find the IP address. That's when the browser connects to the server, and what it gets in return is HTML code. Our browser processes the HTML and it decides that it needs more resources to render that. CSS, images, scripting code, all of that. When it realizes that those are the resources it needs, that's when connections start to the sites, whether it's that server or a different server, and it accesses that information. And only then, that's when we see the website. That's what the browser does on the internet. Right, so when we open a browser, oh dear, the resolution on the screen is not great, is it? So, as I was saying, This is a captcha on Sniffer. I can't remember if in this case it was Google. Well, it could be google.com, right? You access it, and this is what you get. And what information would we access then? HTTPS, really, when you browse on it, would you believe that you can't see anything from the internet? Can you raise your hand if you believe that? Well, most of you are not raising your hand because you know what I'm getting at. But in fact, most people think you can, you have your little log, everything looks green on HTTPS, everything is right. What is encrypted is data. But that doesn't mean that you can't see anything. In fact, on the request, you can see which page it's connecting up to on the DNS query. And if the browser asks who is google.com, that's because you've typed that, right? Then you can see data on the certificate, you can see the IPs, how many connections it's making. You can see all of that. That's not protected or private. So if your browser is making 7 connections, somebody who's connected to the internet can see that you've visited 3 pages and that it's taken you 3 minutes to read a particular screen because it's taken you 3 minutes to make the next connection. And also you can see the size of the information that's transferred. The number of bytes is there. You can see it. And in fact, HTTPS is a protocol that runs over TCP, sorry. And on a captcha, you can see TLS records. On the screenshot. Some are used for handshake, where the certificate is sent. You can see the type of encrypting to be used, and then there's this application data. What does that mean? Oh, it's telling us that's data. It's the HTTP request and the response from the server, which is encrypted. We can't see it as such, but we know how big it is. And that event, that situation, can then be used as a side channel for this type of attack. So I started off telling you that we need a way to generate some kind of a stimulus. That's what we'll call it. And one of the easiest ways to do so is to be in the middle of things. If I'm connected here and somebody is connected elsewhere, so between my system and the other one, there's the man in the middle attacks. There are many different types of attacks, but the basic idea is that instead of following the normal route, bundles would go through my system. It just goes through it. When we hear man in the middle, we think it's a TLS tunnel that will be broken. You will see a warning. You won't see any kind of warning. As long as I don't touch the TLS records, there won't be any kind of warning. I'll just see them go through, I don't touch them, and nothing much happens. It's like getting a box that's closed with secrets inside, but I can still pick up the box, take it, deliver it, do all sorts, follow different routes, and at the end of the day, the recipient doesn't care as long as it gets the box. I can even shake it, I can see how heavy it is, and the final recipient won't even know I've done that. This is not the main topic of our workshop here today that we can see up on the screen now. There's a lot of literature about it, but it's just a reminder of different ways these attacks, different shapes and forms they can take. At the end of my workshop, you will see what kind of attack I prepared when I started with this piece of research. And one of the things that you're told when you go to bounties, one of the things we hear is that that scenario is not very realistic, something like that. They say if you can do the same thing and not be the man in the middle is much better. But you can understand that there are many situations when you connect to a hotel or an airport or where internet providers have ended up changing DNS codes because of different attacks. And once the routers have changed, you're in a man-in-the-middle situation because you are the one who will be asked if you're Google. If I want to intercept Google traffic, all I need to do is when somebody asks, hey, who's Google? I have to say, it's me. And the traffic will come to me then. And you've probably heard about situations where internet providers have been hacked. It's not that an unusual scenario, even though some people think it's very unusual.
Entonces, una de las posibles, aunque no es el foco de la charla, para que no suene a y esto se podría hacer.
And can something like this be done? Fine, it can be done, but how can I do it? You might be wondering. There's not just one single tool for you to do it, but this is quite a common one, BetterCap. It's a tool where the second release came up just a few months ago by Go. It's got an interactive terminal that you access, and through different commands, you can tell the system, oh shame, the pointer is not working, which in IP it should intercept, if it should be done with spoofing, which domain, and can you see that HTTPS address? Well, the idea is that I intercept target.com, then I say, you send it to me, and then I will redirect it wherever it has to go. But then when I respond, I change the contents. So you can add JavaScript code that was not part of the page. And that's the stimulus, the JavaScript code. If I can run JavaScript code for my victim, browsers separate through same origin policy so that you can't access some other website's data. But I can tell the user to send requests. For instance, very silly example, if I send an image to the user and that image has a URL, then the browser will have to connect to that URL. And that will be the stimulus that I mentioned earlier, the stimulus we need. So, what can you see? Well, nothing, really. You can't see anything. But this is what the JavaScript file looks like. Let me just show you this page here, which is in the GitHub. I don't know if you can see anything much here. Is the resolution good enough? How many of you are familiar with Beef? It's a tool that does this. You have to inject JavaScript on the HTTP traffic, which is not encrypted, I insist, is not encrypted. We will see what happens if it is encrypted. So then you can add the beef script or whichever other script you want to use. And thanks to that, you can act on the browser. For instance, changing these images and I want to see my parrot instead. Or I want to redirect to this other website with completely different contents. Whatever. Whatever different contents. Yeah. Oh dear, you have very dirty minds. You were giggling. So, I could use beef, but I can use any other code. So this is what you would need to do for the attack, not with a beef code, but with a different type of code. But I just wanted to show you this website address with a link to scripts like these, because there are many different scripts to do all sorts of things.
Mira, tenéis ahí un cryptominer. Tienes un trozo de código para poner al usuario ahí a minar.
It's a piece of code in this case, so that the user will end up mining bitcoins, for instance. There are all sorts of things, as I was saying, you can do. Here we can see lots of different examples. So, this is the scenario that we are describing. We have this server, a server that injects JavaScript, or we can run JavaScript on the victim's browser. And that can be done through injecting JavaScript when the user is browsing on a website which is not encrypted, or if they visit a website we control. That's how we would serve them the JavaScript. And what do we manage then? Well, connecting to the website that's vulnerable to the Sidechannel attack. How? Through a TCP proxy, or capturing from the internet through a sniffer, so we can measure times and sizes and seeing if the box we're carrying secretly is heavy or light or what. Then we need a certain amount of intelligence that tells JavaScript to tell the browser to do this, checking a password that starts with an A, for instance. And then I listen carefully and see what the weight is. And that's how I decide that A might be good or B might be right. Depending on how heavy it is, I then decide if that information that should be encrypted is right or not, even though I haven't breached that encryption. I haven't decrypted it. That's the magic of HTTPS. Let me just tell you this story as well. This was the first test I run for this type of attack. Well, I'll go back to my story. I visited a customer who had a problem, and I had to come up with a solution. So for those of us who work with pen testing, sometimes our main problem is that we have very limited time to do what we have to do. And you can't imagine the rubbish programming that we do sometimes because of lack of time. And this is my rubbish I came up that time for that particular problem. Look at that. That's my rear view mirror with my mobile phone stuck to it. That's a rubbish solution, right? Well, my solution was pretty much this kind of rubbish. I noticed there were many different images that were loaded from the PHP point that had a slip, and then A was tested with slip 0, B with slip 1, and so on. So when the user worked with a HTML code or JavaScript with the images, Well, in my case, the first time I used HTML. So what happens is that you see the connections after testing A, after testing B, with a distance of 1 second, lag, 1 second apart. And that's how you reach your conclusions. And this is how I told the customer that they were vulnerable to this type of attack. And then the development was done at a later date. This was my second attempt, a little bit later, with JavaScript, which is a bit faster. It doesn't need to wait for 1 second. It doesn't need to be 1 second apart. Just getting all the images so that once the first image is loaded, then it loads the second one, and so on. And that's how it was much faster, because you don't need to tell the system to wait for 1 second. It might take shorter than a second, because obviously you need to first test A to Z for the first character, then start again from scratch for the second character. So it can take quite a while. It's a slow process that needs to be optimized as much as possible. So let's go back to the explanation. Oh, I forgot to mention, I found a problem. How many of you have tried HTTPS 2? Well, not many of you again. And there's a problem here, because when a request is sent and the response is then seen, in HTTPS 2, the system is non-synchronous or asynchronic. Asynchronous. You don't need to wait for a request to be sent and then get the response. The system can wait for 10 requests before it responds. So logically, in that situation, it's almost impossible seeing what response corresponds to what request. So you might not end up with A, B, C, D. At the end of the process, you can't measure the time the way I described earlier. You don't know how far to measure your time. Logically, if they come in the right order, I can match the first request with the first response. But in this other case, you can't. It's not such a simple system. What did I decide? Well, despacito. I decided to go nice and slow. Why does it say FIESTA up on the screen? Well, because I decided to give it a zany name for my tool, for it to be a big fest or a festival. So in this case, when the first HTML request starts, that's not really a problem. It's only a problem when all the resources come into play. I only had one request. I get the response. But remember that requests are asynchronous. That means that I have my little box. I can do things with it. I can't open it, though. I can leave it on the floor for a while. I can follow a different route to take the box to the final destination, anything near enough, as long as I don't open it. You see different colors, blue, red, and purple connections. When I don't know which response corresponds to which request, then I stop one until the server sends a response. And then I know, oh, that's the red one. And only then I let the blue request go. When I get the response for the blue request, then I let the purple one go. So I decided to give this a name, and I called it multiplexing, which I found was useful to measure what was happening on Google, Facebook, all those big websites. They all use HTTPS2. Well, when HTTPS is used, otherwise they use 1.1. So, here we can see an example which has to do with the Akamai website that explains about HTTPS2, and on the left we have the comparison with HTTP1 with different threads, pieces of different squares, 4 at a time.
Entonces, este va cargando de 4.
So it uploads them in 4 because there is 4 threads, and you see that this one is faster and is asynchronous, so it uploads chunks as they come. And in between we see what happens where you get HTTP2 and run it through the tool I produces one by one, because this is what it does. It stops and lets one through and then back again to the beginning. And I said this had to go to be activated manually with a flag, because if you check this out, so what do you think? What was the problem you see here if you do it as the one in the middle? Anyone? Anything? Speed. That's so very slow. So if you need it, why would you have it on? So I deactivated it, disabled it, and if necessary, back on. So now that we understand what the setting is, what the context is, let's cut to the chase. So we have several types of side channel attacks. The most widely used are those that are size-based. Size-based for the app data packages. That's what we were saying before. So those are the sizes. We need to watch those sizes. One of the first few that were published, or the ones that I know, were based on information. Well, they were based on size, but then there was an encryption feature. The encryption feature is about gathering data. It's not just for HTTPS, but generally speaking. Well, it's not encryption, but compression here. So we would get secret data, or considered secret, and data given by users and compress them together. Even if you encrypt them together, that's usually a poor idea. Anyone? Why? No one? Reason is because the compression algorithms, they try to reuse byte flows in order to repeat them. So if I'm in control of part of the data and I know there's a secret in there, I might run tests, as we said, with the password A, B, C, A, B, B, C, C. And if what I add there equals the secret, the result will be smaller. So if for an HTTPS connection, it is crunched and then encrypted next to a session cookie, I can control the URL, for example. So I tried out letters. And if I do it right when I type ABC, that package will be smaller than if I do not get the hit. So if I force it into many queries and requests, I check, and if the size goes smaller or bigger, I will know. So if I try it and it is bigger now, it means that is not a match for other information there. If it's just the same, then it means that that was it. So this is the encryption used for the web. Looks like this. You have a text chain like here, and instead, well, so you compress it and it sees that it's part of it that it's repeated, and so it replaces that part of the string, the test string, with I don't know how many bytes, a few of them, but it'd be kind of a pointer saying this part of the string. I will not say what it is, but I'll explain to you where there's the similar string. So go 20 characters back and pick 4. And that's the way to crunch it, to compress it. So what about, and you can try this. Actually, we will try it in a minute so that you see it live. What if I'm going to get a token, whatever it is, and I start like this, and I try, and I compress it or zip it with gzip, and I see how many characters in there, and it says 43. Why 43? Because that token somehow removed it and moved it to the pointer, and this would be 6 characters. If I add an A, since that A is not a match here, this A would be independent, so size will go up by 1 byte. What if I try with an A? That character will not show on the compressed text, and so that's the B, and the number will increase and say instead of 6, choose 7. So the size of the package will be just the same, even though I add a letter to it. And since it is a match, the size will be the same. Same with the others. If I hit it, the size will not be changed. The number will go up. That's the only thing. And here you have a few examples. This is gzip. Gzip uses same as sites, websites. So let me show this to you. So, well, trying to keep this dynamic and not to bore you down. Can you see that? Let me explain this to you. Secret TXT would be a secret word that I've typed there. An HTTP request is basically an HTTP request. That's what it stands for, the request from our browser to the server. So, this would be replaced with the real secret. I've done it like this just so that you don't see it and you don't cheat. But, basically, split this screen. Let's see if I manage to show it in a visible print. Guess is a replacement in the HTTP request and size. So if it's sh size, it will keep on trying to guess and zipping. So these are 307 characters. So we will modify it here. And as we save it, since it is every second, we would need to see some changes there. Trying to keep it short, I'll ask for a number. Anyone? A number? 8, 2, 8, 307 to 308. Failure or success? Failure. So another one. 2, someone said? 308. So again, let's see how it changes. Who else? 4, 308. Did we nail it? 5. 3. 3 would be. Do we change it or do we move on to the next? 1. Oh, smart girl. I don't remember which number I chose, to be honest. 7, maybe. Oh. I swear it was 7.
A ver. Esperad. No, era el 3. Vamos a hacer una cosa.
It was number 3, actually.
Explicaré en el cual.
There are some conditions, and I'll explain which one. Well, this one should not fail here, but okay. So, which one was it for characters? Right, so okay.
Era un 3, efectivamente. ¿El 1 no lo habíamos probado?
Hadn't we tried number 1? I'll explain in a minute why this is happening.
No lo veo.
What did I choose? So there's some mistake here. There's something where I'm failing myself.
Es secret, ¿no? Sí. Bueno, luego miraré a ver por qué esto no...
Let me see why this is not working.
Que no tengo activo objetivo. No, esto no es en el servidor, es en local. No.
This is not on the server, this is local. This is a text file. I'll check out why this is not working. But this could work. Because, but sometimes this happens because this one here, it's so weird that this is happening like this because I had tried it before. Well, doesn't matter. It might happen. Well, I'm ahead of myself here, but it might happen. And the thing is, what I've just explained is just half of the zipping type or compression type. I'll explain that in a minute, but then there is some coding with Huffman. No, it's not Huffman. Huffman, is it? Some coding there, and the characters can be shortened. And this can be misleading with Huffman coding. But on paper, it should work. This is an attack known as crime. Using JavaScript. So it would send queries to your site. So the cookie name for a session is token, and crime would add token equal, and it would try it out, A, B, C, trying all the letters in the cookie. And then would measure the size of the reply. And so the size would be the same if it was a success, and if it was a failure, the size of the query. We're referring to the query and not to the reply here. It would grow. Breach was quite similar, just the same, but instead of on the request, on the reply. When crime was published and it was on conferences and everything else, but in order to protect itself from crime, the idea was to disable the TLS compression. And so admins were disabling it, but they realized it was so dangerous to keep it on for this kind of attacks that most of the SSL libraries now are not even supporting compression. The attack that I've just shown to you, explained to you, is dead now because the TLS libraries that you will find are not compatible. Even if you want to use it, you won't be able to use it. In order to try this out,
let's have a look at. Vale, yo para probar estas cosas me he hecho.
So here I have my own folder that is public, and you can download it. It's on Docker, and this is something that someone have done of a very old Debian, very old, and I set up a web server with this basis, and that's where I got a silly site. If you want to play around with it, what you need to do is start Docker. Here you have it.
Evidentemente el certificado no es bueno.
It's not a good certificate because it's a self-signed certificate. But that's the site. This is a site that supports compression, so you can try all these attacks here. Actually, if you happen to use, let's try it here. Let me see what local lookback is. Good. Let's try something like this. TCP destination port 443. No. Destination 443. I'd rather show this to you on Bridge. I think it's better than on Crime, at least more useful nowadays. I think I better use Bridge this time. So what happened with Bridge? This was another attack, quite similar to what we've seen. It's also based on compression, but compression on response. So TLS, and we've said that they are not compatible anymore, but on top of TLS we have HTTP, which also supported compression on response. So they used the very same idea as with Bridge, but here what they did was, okay, what I need is sending a request for a parameter that is seen on the response. Kind of a cross-site scripting, but no need to have script code, just need to have the text content, so that would be more than enough. And so they say, okay, so for a parameter that I know that is reflected, I will send it. And so when I see the reflection of the parameter on the response, and you can follow the same technique to learn the value of secrets such as an token, the one used so that if you are checking a form, you cannot be prompted to reply if you haven't been to the form and entered your data. I'll show it to you. That one is why is it not dying? All right, so let's start this one. Same here. This is not a valid certificate, doesn't matter. So basically, let's check it like this, because this way is easier to see. Can you see? This is better. All right. Let's start Wireshark. So, if we force the request value equal inverted commas, and here let's state what we want. See the response originated in (443). and it should be application data. That's the type. All right. Can't see anything, can you? Okay, let's see if I can magnify it. Can you see it? Can you see the number? 592. Let's try and enlarge it a bit further. 592, right? All right. All right. Let's try an A. 593. This already on the network. The other one was a fake, but this one is a real one. So it's increased. Failure success. I'm showing the value to you here, so we've tried. So is it a failure or a success? A failure. Let's try B. And you will see that at a given time, 519, failure or success. And you will see some point this will not work, and I'll explain why. $593 once again. That's because it's not an A. Oh, but you cannot see what I'm typing, can you? But you trust me, don't you? So I typed A. Ah, for an A. And here you have a C. Someone's boycotting me. All right then. So you see, this is a C. This is a C, and yet the size is not T. Let's try something. If you cannot see it. Let's try something.
Pues no sé cómo hacer para que se vea. A ver. Vamos a ver. Tampoco se ve. ¿Ahora se ve? Vale, pues esto es lo que estoy poniendo. Fijaros que he puesto la C.
Just notice that when I typed C, which is meant to be the right one, it told me it was wrong. Why is that? Well, I told you earlier that I have to look for chains that were present. But imagine I say value equals whatever. Well, there might be some other value equals, right? I can't decide where I get my chunks from. Let's see what happens if I don't just get value. I want to get a bigger chunk. Let me type something like this. Then value equals inverted commas, whatever, and that whatever is going to be a longer chunk of the contents, which is not secret. You can see what comes before the token, right? You can see that chunk, that piece of text. Let's try with that. Right, I'm going to restart. So, I must confess, if I start copying and pasting, we could be here until tomorrow. Because the chunk is longer now. Now the size is larger as well. It says 589. Right, now I try with B. Am I doing this right? I wonder. Right, I'm going to adjust this. I can't see what's wrong here. Something is going badly wrong. I don't know what's going wrong with the chains. 589. Right. So I test A.
Pues hoy es el día que no salen las demos, no sé qué está pasando.
Well, today is the day when demos have to go wrong, right?
A ver. Bueno, ahora no sé qué está pasando, pero...
Well, I honestly have no idea what's going wrong. In theory, as I get a longer text, then the algorithm has a better idea. Because what we're saying to our algorithm is, hey, this is the chain you need to reproduce. Oh, I've just thought of what might be the reason why this is going wrong. Let me just check something else. Otherwise, I'll just leave it and check some other time. I was just thinking now, it might be because of the browser. I'm just going to clean this now and get this chunk, this piece of text, and see if that works. Oh, actually, this might come in useful because then I can use this for an explanation I had to give you later on. Right now B, then C. I still get 96. Right, I can see the reason why it was going wrong was the browser. I have no idea why Firefox does two different connections. The second one is always 96 because I'm getting it right. Can you see what I mean? So why on earth is this going wrong? Well, I was thinking the reason might be that I tested it in the past using Firefox as a browser. But the idea is that it's very different if the browser works with a flow encryption or block encryption. Why is that an important difference? Because look at this situation. In a flow encryption, the idea is that from the password and the seed, there is a jet of data, shall we say. And then the length of the message that we want to send is cut shorter. And that's how you get an XOR. At the top, we got the letter right. At the bottom, I got the letter wrong. What's the difference between those two? Just one byte. And that tells us if we got it right or wrong. What happens when encryption works with blocks instead? This might happen. Because encryption happens at the level of blocks. When you get a message of a certain length, there is a refill strategy. I'm not going to go into detail about that, but that's the idea. So whether you're right or wrong, as long as the number of blocks doesn't change, then the size is the same, and the results seem to be the same. So crime and rich, those tools, what do they do to solve this problem? Well, refill and refill until the time comes when the length, well, actually, when I said refill, that would be with characters they could see were not present in the token, CRF token, until there's a new block that is obvious because the size is larger. So they go one step back to run the test then. Why is that? Because if they get it wrong, the additional character would generate a new block. And in that case, you would see there is a difference in size. Whereas if you get it right, the size will remain the same. There won't be a new block, and then we will see the size. Another problem we had just now had to do with Huffman encoding, because zipping signals to the chain that's repeated, and then there's Hoffman encoding, which at the end of the day is a way to portray the most common characters with a smaller bit sequence. They noticed that, for instance, when you say A, the package didn't grow larger because the A made this tree different, and that recoding made the characters not change, even though your guess is wrong. So that's why I think the demo might have gone wrong now. And it's very annoying because it was working beautifully well 1 hour ago, and the compression algorithm should have worked perfectly the same, exactly the same. But you know what computer science is like. So there's this double check strategy. That's what they came up with. The guessing happened on the one side for the characters, as we saw earlier, and then there was a double check, another check at the other end. What happened is if they got it wrong, but the size of the package had to do with Hoffman encoding, the final result would be the same for both of these tests. The Hoffman tree would be altered, and then the size would change. Well, these two requests are the same size, but if you test B and B is right, then the B would increase the value from 9 to 10, and in that case, that would be the size, right? Whereas if you checked at the other end, the other size, when B goes because of that first stage, well, that will not have an impact on the Hoffman encoding. So for every position, there were two checks, one before, one after, so they could compare if the size had changed, and also checking if they were exactly the same between the two, to really double check if the guess was right. So if you have a problem that like we had just now with the demo, this might be the reason. Although, as I said, in theory, if you zip the same set of data, the final outcome would still be the same. So who knows what happened, really. I also wanted to tell you about a number of techniques. For instance, deactivating the zipping at the server side so that responses are not compressed, are not zipped. But even so, I showed you that image earlier on, which is on Docker Hub. That can be activated if you install at the beginning. Is normally deactivated, and sometimes you see a forum asking how to activate compression, and then somebody answers and say, hey, be careful with doing that because you might have this problem if you do it. Then there are the time-based techniques. What's the idea there? Well, who would win in a race? Would Asterix or Obelix? Can you raise your hand if you think Asterix would win? Raise your hand if you think Obelix would win. The final answer is that they would both win because they both drink their magic potion. But in the real world, Asterix would win. If you're really big, then it takes you longer. Running is harder, and just ask me if you don't believe me. We were talking about requests with longer or shorter responses. If your request has a larger response, then that takes longer to get to your browser than a smaller response. That's a clever idea. So what some people did was, hey, let's do away with monitoring on the internet, and then on JavaScript, where I ask for requests, I'm going to measure how long it takes to load an image, for instance. That's how I can tell if it's taken shorter or longer, and I can attack you just when you visit my website. I can send you my JavaScript and I can attack you, and you don't even need to be at home when that happens. Something else these attacks do, apart from the difference in the time for loading, well, now the internet is faster. It's not so easy measuring response times. So another possibility is sending a package, just like we said for bridge later, sending a request that reflects part of the contents, sending a request then that will have such a long response, just like we did with encrypting earlier, staying at the edge of the block so that I know if I failed or succeeded. Well, something very similar, but for TCP packages, generating a request that will be at the limit of the TCP package, so that if you have a longer response by 1 byte, say, in the encrypting, then a different package will have to be sent. So the round-trip time for the package and the CK, well, the time would be maximized then. Here we can see a script, or rather we can't see a script because of the bad resolution on the screen and the letter size. Well, you know that there are JavaScript commands that measure the performance on websites that can be used in this situation. I must confess, I've always been rather skeptical talking about these attacks. It depends on the latency of the DNS when you connect, the network latency, the server latency, and very much depend on the Wi-Fi network or if you use a mobile phone. So these attacks that seem to work fine at the lab, but I have my doubts they would work in the real world. That's why I brought you this example. This is Ángel Prado, one of the authors and designers of Bridge. And he asked the person in charge of time, an attack that was similar to Bridge, but based on timing in this case. So the author of Time said something a bit nasty about Bridge, and then one of the Bridge authors, this man, Ángel, he said, what about your proof of concept, the code for this tool? Where is that available for us to see if it works or not? So the response was the following. Well, I didn't do a fully functional POC because otherwise we might end up with 0 day. And I thought, wow, that's a bit much. The truth of the matter is that for these timing attacks, in most cases, it's like showing a demo, but you can't see anything in detail, and you've seen it, but you haven't. You've only seen it very superficially. I haven't seen proof of concepts for this, where you can really see the tools in detail, to be honest. This is quite similar now to the attack I designed. This is the cross-site searches attacks, which are not based on zipping, because most websites disable zipping. The idea here is that some websites have their own search engines where you can ask for information, and some of those search engines are particularly powerful. For instance, I might say, hey, find in my book phone numbers that start with a 93, for instance. And because, inverted commas, nobody can read encrypted information because actions are protected, for instance, for bank transfers or for resetting passwords. All of that is well protected. But any forms that have to do with queries, developers and security experts tend to think that you can't read them because it's HTTPS. Let me tell you about these attacks. How do they work? Well, the same JavaScript modified, but instead of sending requests for no particular functionality, like in the case of time, then requests are sent to search engines, checking A, B, whatever, and see what the request says. If it says something long, then that means I've got something right. That search engine has something that starts with an A, for instance. Whereas if the response is tiny, it means I've got it wrong. My guess is wrong. If there's a vulnerable application, for instance, with somebody's phone book, contacts, well, that's how that can be exploited and get information, even if the victim is using HTTPS communications. Do you think this had anything to do with stream ciphers and block ciphers? And why? If anybody wants to volunteer and reply, who said yes? And I'll pick on you. Well, in this case, the response would be yes, but. The answer is yes, because if there is a block cipher and the difference in size is bigger, well, that's not really a problem in the practice, because the normal block size is 16 bytes, that is 16 characters. That is one single input. The information on an entry, if it's under 16 characters, that could be a problem. On HTML, what does that mean? If every result has 10 characters, then if you have one additional result, that would generate an additional block. So that wouldn't be a problem in the practice. Hoffman encoding, is that an issue? Not really, because there's no compression. Is padding an issue? No, we're not going to have that problem. This is an attack that can also be time-based. A request, and instead of checking for size, we would be checking for time, just like the other attack I described earlier. Checking for time and then do the computation. I haven't seen a proof of concept for this either. Nathaniel Galenter showed the tool, ran the demo. Nothing was published on it, no details. So I'm not saying this doesn't work. I'm just saying that I haven't been able to verify it works. And I checked the other option, the one for the network, and I saw how many issues that involves. I'm rather skeptical. It might work in certain very particular environments only. In this case, the author used a technique where he tried to find one parameter that would be present in the different responses to make it larger. For instance, if the difference is 3 bytes, when you load and try and measure the time difference, you're not going to be able to compute that. You need something more consistent than that. So where does that lead us? Well, to the new type of side channel attack. Because this all started with a problem a customer had, as I said earlier. Instead of it being based on time, it was based on size. So when I designed my first tool, I decided, I'm going to check on Google, on Facebook. I bet I want to test this. And it didn't work on any of them. Why? Well, probably because of random elements. This is an example of curling on Google, measuring characters. And there's one size 1 minute, the next second a different size. That means there's not one standard size. Why? Well, because they have these hellish JavaScripts for every request, sometimes with random names. It's impossible. Measuring the time for this type of request was totally impossible. And I don't like losing, so I thought and thought and thought again, and I came up with an idea. I thought, well, size is not the only element that we can use for side channels. Size or time, which is connected with size at the end of the day. So it's size again. But there are more elements we can use. Like what? Well, I came up with this idea. Who uses Google Contacts for your contacts? Well, quite a lot of you, right? I suddenly realized that every result loads an image. And I found that if I test something and that fails, you can see on the network one connection for image loading to the place where Google has images. What is that? Well, it's your own picture, right? The picture that you can see on the right. And if you get it right, what you get is 2 images. My own image and the image that's been found and loaded. So if we count the number of connections, could we know then and calculate the number of results? Well, the answer to that question was yes, although it's rather a complex answer because there is a cache. For instance, for 10 images, when you test it again and you got it right again, you get your results. And if they had been present in the previous page, you can't see them loading because they have been cached. The browser doesn't make the connection to the images. I checked an example. They're saved for 24 hours. And when are images cached? When the browser gets the image. If the browser sends a request and I see it, I make a note of it. And then I need to let it go. Well, I do. But I still know a request has been made and the image won't be cached because there's never been a response. That's why browsers try 2-3 times maybe, but because the number of times they try is deterministic. For instance, I have 2 images, right? Well, I don't care going from 1 connection to 2 connections or from 2 connections to 4, because it tries twice for every connection. As long as I see the difference, that's enough for me.
Y además,
And you cannot really say that, but there was another trick that I came up with, because, okay, you're using that site, right? Less than 24 hours ago, so you will have cache images, right? But from your local CDN, if you route it so that it goes through Buenos Aires, when they go onto Facebook from Buenos Aires or well onto Google or whatever, Google, Facebook will say, okay, take this because you come from a Buenos Aires IP, so get the images from my CDN there where the path is completely different from what you would upload here, which have not been cached. So there, you can run the attack anyway. So all of this, I said, okay, so who's vulnerable here? And so, as it seems, Gmail was not, but Google Inbox that has access to the emails in on Google, it was. Google Drive, just the same, because there is a preview profile. So there you have that image that you cannot see, but you see the line, right? The line there is a preview. Uploaded there. Dropbox had it. Well, as for Dropbox, the image was uploaded when you couldn't find anything else. But it doesn't matter because what we check is the difference between a match and a failure. And that's what we try and find, a difference. And Facebook had it. On Facebook Messenger, you use the browser for searching, and you would see as many images as chats where the words that you had typed were matched. Even though it is on video, but and it seems it's not my day for demos, I'll try and do it.
Bueno, esta es la herramienta de la que os hablaba. La he llamado FIESTA.
This is FIESTA. This looks like a shot, right? It's shot glass, but this is stylus. Metaxploit. Most of them are not yet implemented. This aims to be Metaxploit. This is the cross-site search, the one that we saw checked the size. Let's see if it works. Let's run it.
Vale. Le voy a decir, os lo voy a enseñar, bueno, voy a ponerlo aquí, voy a ponerle que vaya arrancando esto.
Let's start this one. In case the session is over now. This is a silly site that has an agenda. Or a phone list that I made up. So this is an example. The first example. Networks here. Let's say images. If I visit this site, maybe we could inject this JavaScript that I said before. All right. Let's see what happens. See down here, some images uploading. Those images, it says 555, 555, whatever. So that's trying phone numbers. Trying to get those phone numbers out of the phone list. The handset is in between. This is a victim, which we could mask and hide. And this here, you can see the number, right? So trying numbers one by one. And so when it's finished on the right side, it'll start on the left side. So tried every possibility. None of them is good enough and started on the left side. These are US numbers, 555, and it says, here's one. And it keeps on searching. And it gets the phone numbers, because I've given 555, fine, left to right, but maybe I could have used a name and said, give me the number. Gets the numbers out, and down here when it says over, he says, okay, found it. And there's another one here. Another one. And here, let me see if I can magnify it. See the numbers at all? Another one found. So here you have the numbers, every number, trying and getting the numbers, right? Not my phone list. I wish. Have you just seen that? Let's hope for that. Well, let's run it till it's complete. But here you see a picture, an image of every proof, and checking the size. And this was quite similar to what I found for a client when doing this, but I was a bit tacky when doing this. But here you have it. You have the phones there. Connections next. The one, as I said, with this technique I tried with Google, Facebook and everything, it didn't work. So I got to thinking and I came up with the connections, and this is what implements connections. Here I said Google was vulnerable, Facebook as well, Dropbox as well. So I reported it, some fixed it, some others didn't. Google didn't. Google claims this is not deemed a problem, so that I was told they wouldn't fix it. So every Google product that I've shown to you are vulnerable to this technique. So let's start from the top of it. Only thing is about Google For the images to be uploaded, I cannot upload Google content and send the request as if it were an image. Anyone? Why? If I upload the content from a request onto Google Contacts as if it were an image, it'll get the HTML content, it'll try to interpret it as an image, and it'll fail because it is not an image. But it will not bring the images because it will render nothing. We said so we need to upload it with the frame. Google will not allow for that. Or on a pop-up, open somewhere, or a tab. Let's use an open window, because it's easier to see. And then I'll show to you how we have it with two tabs, so where it's a bit more hidden. For a proof of concept, I use a window because it's more visible. But it is true, though, that I implemented the tab as well, because oftentimes when explaining things, people said, okay, you can see the window, can't you? Well, because I didn't mean to hide it, but you can hide it if you wish. So I implemented it and say, see? There's another agenda, which you cannot see either, but I will zoom in. And then, let's see if we get where Wolverine's phone. Can we get it? I've always wanted it.
Y vale, ya está esperando conexiones. Y lo único es que tenemos que abrir esa ventanita. Os fijáis que ahí abajo pone Automatic Speed Calibration, ¿verdad?
So it says Automatic Speed Calibration. So in the end, when you render a whole page, it takes some time to upload. Actually, this kind of attacks is much slower than others because it needs to wait for the whole page to be rendered. So here, during the calibration, there's some testing, and it starts as shorter time and enlarging it to see to what extent or when it starts getting what it expected. So try it to explain with a good and a fake request, and then it sees how long it has to wait. And so once it's there, it starts extracting characters. That time is needed because if it's too long a time, it'll be way too slow. And if it's too short a time, I might send to another query before it is rendered. So I would lose some connections there. Down there you see 1, 2. 1, I had typed it. I say start on 1 so that it wouldn't go both ways. 2, 0. I guess you cannot see that, but the upper line, what it says is no results. And when it shows, when it shows down there, it is a result. That's what it is. But you don't see the picture because if you remember, I'm just throwing the image because I won't allow it to be uploaded because I'm not interested, but that's a 5. 102. 1202 555 if I'm not mistaken, or 01 or something like that. So it keeps trying every character and says not this one, yeah, this one, yes. Here basically on the network, it seems you're seeing the traffic, but browsers oftentimes do things that are a bit weird. At that time where I say wait for that long, the server takes longer to reply and it fails. So it runs several tests for every character to make sure that if I say this is a good one, it's a good one. And sometimes it even fails. I don't know about this one. So if I find this is a valid character, when I check the others, I send a request. The previous good one is considered a good one, and then I have the wrong one, an XX, or whatever the string I choose that I know will not be there. So if they look very much alike, I say, okay, that means that I was mistaken the other time, and I discard it. So there are some optimizations for the code to make sure there are no mistakes. Still, I've run it so many times, and sometimes there are mistakes though. So following the traffic, these rules can cause a mistake, and so I'm skeptical about timing, because I see the package, and there's a mistake, right, in the mechanism. Cannot see that now, but I think it's zero. What's missing here? One character to get it all. 166. Okay, now it'll take it some time because it'll look for characters in the beginning before Wolverine, and so this is on your Wi-Fi. Get in your Google contact list as you read the newspaper. See what I mean? So what it says is,
dice, encontrado Wolverine con este teléfono. A ver. Este no lo queremos. A ver, vamos a ver si es verdad.
let's see if that one's true. Oops.
Demasiado. No se ve, ¿verdad?
You can't see, can you? All right.
Me han fallado las otras dos demos que no me...
These two other demos failed, so I hope you don't really need to go on my word. Can you see? Who says it's the same? Who will change their Google contact list just right now? I forgot about the tabs. As I was told about the little window, because the little window is not a low profile, you would not give that to your user, but I was not meaning to hide it, was I? So that's what I came up with. See that it says that the uploading technique is open. You see image and frame and open and tab. So let's change it. And let's click here. I'll show the real video in a minute, but as you click, it takes you somewhere else where they keep you busy with whatever it is, a snake game or whatever. And the tab, as you can see, and the one in between, in the middle rather, is the one, you see that? It's uploading, doing something there. But there's a JavaScript here, and when the first JavaScript changes the link to open another tab, there's another JavaScript code. So as it is open and I'm there, the JavaScript here that you open saying, okay, try this, try that, try whatever. And there is another JavaScript code, and if my mouse gets out of this site, it pops out. And so if it's out of that page where the user is to be entertained, it swaps the side of the page, and so that you can see it. So error management is yet to be improved. This was a test for me, but there are so many ways around it in order to hide away pop-ups or traffic. I don't know if you know this YouTube channel, Live Overflow. Some lads who teach different things on their YouTube channel. It's quite good, by the way. And one of the things they do is first they pick, because there's some companies that for advertising they have pop-unders. So instead of opening the pop-up, they use fails in browsers, so you open the pop-up behind or in the background. I don't know what's the goal, but there it is. And Live Overflow, they have several of these. They download the demo version, reverse engineering, and they find what the trick is. Maybe open a PDF and then closing it. But this is patched up by developers. So I decided not to use any of these techniques because it's a technique that you develop today and maybe tomorrow another one. So I did what I said. Because I used the tabs because I found this was easy. This is from The Wired, which is well known in the UK. And you would click on a piece of news, and as you were reading it, you see on the top left side, it is uploading, it's testing. And as you move the mouse, I say, well, I'm going to click, what's this here? Uploading. And if you also got lots of tabs, because I divide it there, so that I see what it has been done. But if there are a few more tabs, odds are that one of those tabs is digging into their contact list. Quite highly probable. And that's all I wanted to say. And conclusions, well, a few more that could be added, but just compression is the devil. Don't use it. Exploiting a side channel is time consuming, but it is true. So see this. There are many requests, and in order to get a phone number like this, it's taken several minutes, right? 3 minutes or so. So in order to get lots of data, it would take hours, but it works. It does. It is slow, but still it works. And if someone wants to dig data out through side channeling, yeah, share Wi-Fi with them for 20 minutes, half an hour, and they can get lots of information out, right? Third one, avoid side channels. Avoiding side channels is pretty difficult. Actually, when I reported this mistake or bug, the people who were supposed to fix it, they would say, what's your suggestion to fix it? Because it's pretty complicated, isn't it? And then now I solve this for you, and they would say, well, would I randomize the number of images? It is a big mess. Then what they did was treat it as a CSRF. Actually, the forms, well, some of them didn't fix it, but Facebook, Dropbox, what they did was add an anti-CSRF token. Dropbox adding also as anti-CSRF token. And so when having access to the form without coming from the form itself, there would be a pop-up and they would say, are you sure? And so they wouldn't click and there would not be a search and no images. So for efficiency, I think it was worth it, more worth it than a token. And it was another solution that I found was good enough. But I feel these attacks that are based on a browser, you need to have a token so that there are no requests on that searcher, on that browser. And that's been all. Thank you for your attention. That's my email account. I would be happy to reply. Questions? Everything is clear? So thank you very much to all of you.